one side has an edge?
So I think it's super important. I mean, we've said this over and over throughout our Pioneer rounds. There's got to be some early interaction. If you let these green decks do whatever they want on the first 1, 2, and 3 turns, the game's over at that point, right?
Yeah.
Their draws are potentially so explosive, and then what they do is very powerful. Yeah, super important getting that turn 1 fatal push.
Yeah, just as you described, Edgar goes for turn 1 elf. Chris Barone is ready with fatal push. Stop Edgar from advancing his mana. And we really saw that illustrated last round down in the feature match area. We got to see Edgar take on Martin Mueller. And the white decks just don't have access to turn 1 removal, and you could tell Edgar was free to do basically whatever he wanted in that matchup.
Yeah, on the play, he went turn 1 elf into turn 2 planeswalker, I believe in games 1 and 3, and it was not close.
A little bit slower start here. We have Stonecoil Serpent. 2 counters. Chris Barone answers with Scrap Heap Scrounger. Edgar going to go ahead, plus up that Nissa, make a plant token, have it ready for some blocking action. Mutavault, one of the lands for Chris Barone. You always want to keep track of what active lands the mono black player has on their side of the battlefield. There's, of course, Castle Lochthwain in the deck.
Wow.
And getting aggressive, both Scrap Heap Scrounger and Mutavault. Looks like they're headed at Nissa.
Yeah, I'm surprised by this play. And if you're on Edgar's side, I think you just snap off trading. I'm really surprised by this. That land is just so important to the opponent.
You wanted to see him take out the Mutavault.
Yeah, it just feels like you just start choking your opponent out on resources if you trade with their land there.
Sure. Interesting. Edgar chose to pass on that trade. Going to go ahead, play an untapped land, 4 mana for a Voracious Hydra that is going to fight the Bloodsoaked Champion. Now Edgar getting some defenses together, choosing not to attack with Serpent there, holding it back. I'll say this, Craig. I don't know if you're supposed to trade in that spot or not with the Mutavault, but a body on the battlefield for the Hardened Scales deck is extremely meaningful. You have so many things that'll buff it over time. Trading in general, not super incentivized for the deck. It's an exception when you're talking about lands, for sure. That's a different kind of trade. But you could see some of the motivations why Edgar might want to pass on that block there. Here comes Scrap Heap Scrounger at Nissa again. Plant's just going to hop in the way.
Yeah, and peeking at Chris's hand here, it looks like he's got lots of lands in there, which is rough. One of the problems with these mono black aggro decks is they don't have a lot of deck manipulation going on.
Oh, yeah.
They really lean heavily on Smuggler's Copter to smooth out their draws.
It looks like 4 swamps in hand for Chris. A disastrous draw. No such problems for Edgar. Going to go ahead and cast Once Upon a Time. Looks like has a choice of Ballista, Stonecoil Serpent, Llanowar Elf. Going to take the Ballista.
Yeah, the mid-game Ballista is just so good.
Absolutely. More mana available, too, if Edgar wants. I see a Hardened Scales in hand. This is going to be a setup turn. Next turn's going to be real big for Edgar.
Well, I think Edgar might just say it's go time here.
A little minus action?
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, his army's going to get so big.
Right.
And, you know, with the way that the first couple of turns played out, it's pretty apparent that Chris doesn't have a lot of action going on his side.
Sure.
So you say, all right, I'm just going to set it up to finish the game in the next kind of 2 to 3 turns.
Yeah, Chris draws another swamp for the turn. Hand of 5 swamps presently. Craig, this one's over.
It is. You know, it's funny. He's got that castle, but he can't even get enough of the swamps out of his hand in order to activate the castle because he's going to be losing so much life if he goes that route.
I don't think Chris drew a non-land card this game. He's played a Fatal Push, a Bloodsoaked Champion, Scrap Heap Scrounger. I assume he kept those 3 cards with 4 lands?
Yep. And when the lands that you're keeping are Mutavault and the castle.
Ooh. Second Hardened Scales for Edgar.
Yeah, this is just insult to injury, right?
Yeah. It's going to make a 4 power Walking Ballista. And Chris has had enough. I don't blame him. Unfortunate draws for Chris Barone, but Edgar Magalhaes up a game. 1 game to 0 over mono black aggro. That means it's sideboard time, Craig, and I think things will get real interesting in these post-board games. We're going to start over on Chris Barone's side. There you see 4 Leyline of the Void. I love that Chris chose to play this card. This is a really smart inclusion, and we're not seeing enough Leyline of the Void in this format right now. Not great here, but I still like it overall. 4 Noxious Grasp, 3 Legion's End, 2 Collective Brutality, 1 Kalitas, Trader of Get, and a Duress. Craig, what do you want to do on Chris's side?
So I think Chris is going to sideboard in a much more controlling deck in these games. So the Noxious Grasp, spectacular here. The Legion's End, I think, is spectacular here. And I actually like bringing in the Kalitas as well, where you're saying the game's going to slow down a little bit, but if I'm able to get this on the board, it's harder for you to interact with. And then as I start killing off your guys, my zombie army grows.
I think that's a great approach. Meanwhile, over on Edgar's side, we are looking at 3 Hangerback Walker, 3 Thoughtseize, 3 Fatal Push, 2 Golgari Charm, 2 Noxious Grasp, a Questing Beast, and a Scavenging Ooze. Craig, what do you like there?
So if the game's going to slow down a little bit, there's going to be more removal. Things are going to be a little more grindy. I like the Hangerback Walkers a lot.
Me too.
The opponent needs several answers in order to get this off of the board. I like the Scavenging Ooze a good bit in this matchup. One of the ways that the mono black deck gets their virtual card advantage is to access to cards in their graveyard.
Yep.
And the Scavenging Ooze can shut off that path. A lot of these other cards, I'm reluctant to sideboard too much because of all the synergies in the Hardened Scales deck. You don't want to be cutting into your synergies too much.
No, that makes sense. A light touch is probably better if you're over on Edgar's side. Just thinking about Golgari Charm, how many things in the deck it actually takes out if you want to use it as a means of controlling your opponent's aggression, maybe a play-draw decision. Hits Night Market Lookout, Blood-Soaked Champion, Gutter Bones. I don't know if that's quite enough. I would really prefer it has an enchantment target to go after, or maybe some way to get utility out of that regeneration effect. I don't know. Maybe you can find enough uses for it.
Well, so some of those cards you listed, I expect to be sided out almost every time.
Sure.
The Night Market Lookout, I can't imagine that's in the deck for games 2 and 3, because we listed 8 cards that we'd like to bring in,
right?
Which means we got to start cutting some of these other cards from the deck.
Yeah, X1 seems like a good place to start cutting things. Super vulnerable to the ballistas, obviously.
Yeah, and this type of matchup, the 1/1 for the little bit of extra reach, pinging them each turn, is not what the matchup is about.
Sure. Well, if you are anything like me, you are trying to learn as much about this Pioneer format as you possibly can. It is absolutely enthralling. Great place to go for info. Star City Games Premium, of course. Become a Star City Games Premium member today, and you get instant access to our content, an ad-free experience, and of course a discount on SCG purchases. You know I'm using that one all the time.
Yes, you are.
You can head to go.starcitygames.com/premium to find out more.
You were doing a little window shopping earlier. Have you settled on anything you like?
Oh, Craig. I mean, it's this constant push and pull where my wallet is being pulled all the time, and my wife is pushing me out of the house for spending all my money on Magic cards.
Okay.
But there is a Time Vault sitting in the case.
It's what the heart wants first.
It just keeps calling me over and over. And I go and I hold it every now and then and just think about what it would be like if I owned a Time Vault and did nothing with it as it sat on my bookshelf, just collecting dust. But I would have it, Craig, just in case I needed it. You never know.
Yeah. How much other power are you working with?
I only have one other piece. I only have my Mox Ruby from the last SCG-Con that I won here. I've been disciplined. I really have been. I haven't gone buck wild on the power yet. Yet. Big yet there.
How's that podcast doing?
Podcast is good. Podcast's always doing good.
It can support your habits?
It helps. It helps. Nothing supports them entirely, but it helps. Craig, of course, talking about the Arena Decklist podcast. He brought it up, not me. He said it. I just have to clarify. It's not shilling if you're just clarifying.
Yep. Look at you.
That's my personal rule.
What you really need is a support group.
Right. I know, Craig. That's the first step, right? I just have to admit I have a card buying problem, and then I can start addressing it.
So I think if you got together with a support group and everyone was talking about all the cards that they were interested in buying, it might actually be worse.
Yeah, I just want to buy those. Yeah. I'd be like, oh, that's a good buy. Yeah. Get in on that.
Oh, no, you definitely should have done that.
Right.
You missed your opportunity.
Yeah, it's the wrong kind of support group. They just support your purchases over and over.
Oh, man.
Once upon a time here from Edgar.
That's
free
a
spells.
card that should have never been made.
Well, it exists now. Edgar, smart for playing it. Going to go ahead, fire off turn 1 Hardened Scales. Meanwhile, over on Chris's side, we started with a Castle Lockdwain tapped. That's not a great sign. Going to follow it up with a Thoughtseize. I hope we have a second land here, Craig.
Yeah, the second land obviously super important.
It might be a Mutavault.
But, I mean...
This is a strong hand.
Yes, but this is a great Thoughtseize. I would think we'd want to get the Hangerback Walker.
We're going to take Vivian.
That tells me... We have to have an exile effect in our hand if we're leaving that Hangerback Walker around, right?
Maybe. We could have Legion's End.
Legion's End.
Could have another Thoughtseize, and you don't think Edgar's going to play it this turn? That's possible. Mutavault is the second land. Edgar draws for the turn, finds another land. If you're Edgar, do you just jam this Hangerback Walker?
Yeah, I think it's great to get it on the board.
I agree. So does Edgar.
You put the opponent to the test right away.
Chris draws a Swamp. Very important draw there. Does he have an answer? I see a Legion's End in hand. So now it makes sense.
Yeah, it would have been pretty shocking.
And a Thoughtseize. Okay. Chris is doing a good job of picking apart Edgar in this game. Going to go ahead, get either Hardened Scales or Fatal Push out of hand.
And I'm a little bit surprised to see the Fatal Push in Edgar's deck. A lot of the creatures on the other side are very similar.
True.
To me, the only card you really care about is the Smuggler's Copter. But maybe Edgar thinks that card's important enough in this matchup where he's got to kill it when he can.
I could see that. Legion's End going to come down, answer that Hangerback Walker, no tokens. So that means Edgar's only relevant spell at this point is a Hardened Scales. But with double Hardened Scales, anything off the top presents a large problem for Chris. Let's see if he can get some offense going before that happens. Thoughtseize backed up by Aggression, going to stay a hallmark of this format for as long as you can play those cards together. And here we go. We're on the battlefield. A 2-1 and a 3-2 for Chris. That'll present a quick clock. Edgar has a Winding Constrictor. Again, you find that payoff, you're in great shape. Doesn't have it yet.
I actually like Chris's hand a lot this game. The double Thoughtseize, kill your most relevant threat, and now I'm backing it up with some pressure, and not just pressure. Like,
ooh, look
Rankle
at this pressure.
Is great here.
Yeah. Rankle is another one of those incredible synergies in this mono black aggro deck that you see over and over. Go ahead and dump your Scrap Heap Scrounger. Who cares? You'll get it back in the future.
Yeah, 100%.
It's probably Bloodsoak Champion going to the bin here, but
yes. But yeah, it's the versatility that you get out of this creature where you're saying it's haste, which is great when battling against Planeswalkers. It has the ability to draw cards. It has the ability to attack the opponent's hand. And it cleans up their creatures that are left around.
Yeah, Edgar just draws another land here. Not ideal. Chris going to go ahead and activate Mutavault. The whole team coming in. This one getting out of hand real quickly. Going to force a discard. Return that champion to the battlefield, and Edgar needs something right now.
Yeah, as lopsided as we said the first game was, this one's the same thing on the other side.
Here's Once Upon a Time. Going to go ahead and take a look at 5. Walking Ballista.
Ooh, that's a biggie.
Also found Scavenging Ooze, but I think you just have to go Ballista here. Ballista for 3 keeps you alive, I believe.
Oh, yeah. So the Ballista, he's going to be able to block the biggest ground thing and then take out Rankle from the air.
It's a start. Chris Swamp. Noxious Grasp, I believe, in hand.
Yep.
Chris going to go ahead and activate Mutavault.
Yeah, I think I'm on the same page as Chris here, where you
just slam.
Yeah, just get aggressive, pressure the opponent's life total.
Totally agree. I think Edgar's considering if there's a way he can avoid taking down the Rankle. Says no. Gonna make the block.
Initially, he's like, I'll block this. No, I save more life if I block that.
Seems better. Edgar gonna fall to 5 here. Needs to rip something off the top one more time.
Yeah, and there's not a lot of good draws when you're staring at the Noxious Grasp on the other side of the board.
And that's just a land, and that's going to get a scoop, and that means we're tied up a game apiece. We're going to head to a decisive Game 3 here, Chris Barone versus Edgar Magalhaes. Let's talk about what Chris Barone's accomplished today. Not a name we're super familiar with here on the SCG Tour, taking on the absolute best players we have to offer, and just crushing it, 9-0-1. What does it take to have that kind of consistency when you're not a featured name here on the SCG Tour?
So it's funny, after round 1 yesterday, we watched Ross play, and you were like, I really like this mono black deck. You were just all about it, and as I've watched it play more, it seems to have more versatility than initially strikes you when you look at the deck.
Absolutely.
When you look at the land slots, you've got the Mutavaults and the Castles, which just add so much utility to the deck. We're talking about Rankle that does a bunch of different things for you. You have the pressure. You can play the longer, grindier game. It's a nice package.
Yeah, I've been super impressed by it throughout the day, but I would say the same thing about the Lotus Box Hardened Scales deck. Equally impressive. I think the real breakthrough for them was adding the Mana Elves to the deck. A lot of early versions of the deck were not playing Mana Elves in those high numbers. They were instead playing more interactive spells in the main deck. Those Thought Seizes and Fatal Pushes you are seeing now in Edgar's sideboard were often in the main deck.
Sure.
At this point, the deck has just become super lean, super linear. Lotus Box folks have gotten it to a really nice place and has carried Edgar to a 9-1 finish thus far.
Yeah, it reminds me a lot of the mono green Devotion deck in that it's just trying to execute its game plan now and worries about interaction in games 2 and 3 if it feels it needs to.
Yeah, I like that approach. As things are uncertain, you just want to maximize what you're capable of.
Well, yeah, especially if the other decks in the format get more and more linear, where they're just kind of ignoring what you're doing and they do what they do. If what you're doing is more powerful than what they're trying to do, then who cares about disrupting them if you can just execute your own game plan?
Doing a little search through Chris Barone's past results. Not finding a lot, Craig. I mean,
okay.
This is a fresh face here in the SCG Tour. A couple classic, nice finishes, a top 4 in a classic in Worcester with humans, playing the same deck in the modern portion of the tournament here.
Sure.
Maybe this is the chance for Chris Barone to break through. Certainly, you win this tournament, you get that Players' Championship spot. You can make a name for yourself real fast here on the SCG Tour.
Oh, yeah. You get that token that floats around.
Yeah, you'll spend a lot of time in our future match area. You choose the right token.
Well, and we all expect it to be a food this go-round.
That is the assumption. You never know, though. Maybe a player will have something else in their heart. I would have chose a squirrel no matter what, I'll tell you that. Even in this spot, I would still choose squirrel.
I was about to say, if you got a second token, you just run back squirrel.
If they let me. Love squirrels. Underrated animal, Craig.
Oh, yeah? Is it?
So underrated. They're so smart.
Oh, they're very intelligent.
Very intelligent. They get a bad rap.
Like Calc 3 type of smart?
Yeah, they can solve puzzles. They remember a lot of things. I will tell you, as I befriended the squirrels in my backyard, I realized there was a lot of personality there.
So you have squirrel buddies?
I did when I lived in New York. The squirrels are not as numerous in Seattle for some reason. But I had squirrels I fed by hand when I lived in New York. They all had names.
All right, hit us with a few of the names.
Crimp.
Crimp
was one of the squirrels. He had a crimp tail.
Sure.
There was Mama Squaws, who successfully birthed several litters of baby squirrels, and we met those baby squirrels as well.
Nice mama.
Yeah.
It's funny, I want to give you a hard time about this, but we have a decent number of feral cats in my neighborhood.
Okay, so you know what I'm talking about. You take care of the cats.
Well, and the names that you give them are just very... You know, the one is a black and white tuxedo cat, and we just call him Mr. Tux.
Sure.
And he's super friendly. He loves to come around, get some pets, says hi, tries to follow us into our house sometimes.
Right. Yeah, our squirrels would hang off our screen door. They could climb up and like hook their little claws in it, and when we weren't feeding them, they would just hang off the screen door.
They're just there waiting.
Yeah, it was a little creepy. Still love them, though. Hangerback Walker is the play from Edgar. Turn 2. Slow start from both players here. Chris just going to deal with that problem right now. Legion's End going to take care of the Hangerback Walker.
This is a slow start for Edgar, but I kind of like that he's got like the Hangerback Walker that you want to answer right away.
Yep.
And now he's got a Nissa, which the opponent's going to want to answer right away.
Well, we saw how important Nissa was in that game 1. Absolutely critical. Now, though, there are more answers. Noxious Grasp in the deck for Chris. Chris draws a Thoughtseize here. Boy, it feels like Chris's hand just full of answers. And there you see the Noxious Grasp.
And it's lining up perfectly.
Does he have a third land, though? Doesn't. Okay, that's the squeeze point. And now here's a play from Edgar. Winding Constrictor into Walking Ballista.
It is a squeeze point, but sometimes when you're on Edgar's side of the board, you say, like he missed a land drop. That means he's got all action.
All gas, yeah. And we see his hand. There's a Fatal Push at the ready. Did draw a land for this turn. Not going to miss again. Here's Fatal Push on Walking Ballista. Here's Fatal Push on Winding Constrictor. And now Edgar just needs to draw something nice off the top of the deck. Here's Thoughtseize. It's going to answer that Golgari Charm. We wondered about that one. It did make the cut. And now Edgar hellbent. Here's a Scavenging Ooze. That's a big draw.
It's a good draw, but there's not... I still feel like Chris is just in the driver's seat.
Sure, Chris has the answer in hand. Murderous Rider already at the ready.
And even if he didn't, the ooze can grow to a 4/4 or 5/4, however big it's going to be. But it's still just not this crazy. It's not huge, right?
Right.
It doesn't just snowball onto the board.
So what does Chris want to do here?
So I think if your plan is to Murderous Rider this ooze, you just saw the Golgari Charm out of the opponent's deck.
At the latest, you want to do it on an upkeep, I think.
Yeah, well, I feel like you just do it now, right? Yeah, I mean, upkeep, it's kind of the same thing. But if you feel like 100% of the time you're going to kill this when your opponent goes to attack on their turn, there's just no reason to let them draw a card there.
Unless you think there's a reason you want Edgar to burn some of his resources in the graveyard. I mean, he's going to do so anyway, but you can give him the chance to do something wrong, right?
Sure.
Once Edgar spends the mana, though, to pump up that ooze, may as well fire off. Chris does. Edgar just draws a land here. And now Chris firmly in the driver's seat. Going to go 1-drop into 2-drop here.
Yeah, I mean, his hand is great.
Yep.
He's got the Copter. He's got a Rankle when he draws another mana source.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that Murderous Rider's just waiting over there to be deployed.
Going to go with the Scrap Heap Scrounger into Knight of the Ebon Legion. Just passes the turn back to Edgar. Edgar draws another land. I will tell you, Craig, Hardened Scales doesn't play from behind all that well.
No, it doesn't. And, when you don't have a lot of cards, a lot of the draw steps get worse and worse. A Coiling Oracle, not Coiling Oracle, the Constrictor.
Sure.
Or a Hardened Scales. Like, those are both very mediocre cards by themselves.
Not good off the top.
I mean, even Anissa here is just not the same high-impact card that we're used to seeing.
Yeah. Chris going to go ahead, rumble in. 4 power worth of creatures. Edgar going to make a block. Doesn't want that knight to get a token. Block's good. Edgar takes 1. And more strong follow-ups from Chris. It's Smuggler's Copter. Edgar draws Hangerback Walker. Okay.
That's a good one.
That's about as good as it can get off the top. What can we put together here? We know Chris with Rankle in hand.
So going all the way back to when Hangerback Walker was in Standard, there would be games where it would get onto the board, and you have to figure out a way to kill your opponent without killing the Hangerback Walker.
Right. Smuggler's Copter can help with that, presently.
Yeah, I think you're okay with trading with it right here and giving him 3 counters.
Not going to, though. Not going to offer the trade, just the Smuggler's Copter attack.
But once it's a 4/4 or 5/5, you almost want to just leave it on the board.
Yeah. Walking Ballista. Okay, we are finding efficient expenditures of our mana at this point.
Yeah, Edgar's just finding the...
Perfects.
Yeah, great parts of his deck and fading the mediocre ones.
Can Edgar find a way back into this game? It looked hopeless just a couple turns ago.
And now Edgar's wondering how he wants to use his mana.
Right.
Because he'd really like to keep growing the Hangerback Walker. You're staring down some 3-power creatures on the other side. So he's wondering, do I make the 3/3 Ballista here, or do I make the 2/2 Ballista and have the mana to pump my Hangerback Walker. And I think with the way that Chris played last turn, I think I would have leaned towards the bigger Walking Ballista.
You're assuming he's not going to make the hard attack because he did on the last turn.
Yep.
I think that's very perceptive, Craig. It's an interesting decision. Thought sees the draw for Chris. That's no longer all that strong. Of course, that Smuggler's Copter can pitch that, find something a little bit better. Murderous Rider in hand for Chris Barone. Boy, when you only draw 3 lands, this deck has a lot of gas, huh?
It really does, but he wanted that 4th mana in there for Rankle at some point.
Noxious Grasp, the draw. Going to go ahead and discard that Thoughtseize.
How good is it? Just the mid-game Thoughtseize is just not a draw. Not a dead draw. You just cycle it away.
Smuggler's Copter is an absurd card. I will say I appreciate its presence in this format. I'm very glad it's here. I think it leads to a lot of interesting deck building. I think it gives these decks the boost they need against these really, really powerful linear strategies like the ones we saw in the last round. Bant Ramp, those type of setups. Well, Murderous Rider going to be cast. It's targeting Walking Ballista. I have a feeling it's not going to end up on Adventure.
Yeah. The Walking Ballista will get used twice.
It is going to kill that Knight of the Ebon Legion.
Which means, yeah, the Murderous Rider is going to fizzle and does not end up on Adventure.
Correct.
And that might have been a bit of a misstep by Chris there. I don't think he realized that's how that was going to play out. And I still wish Chris had offered to trade with that Walking Ballista as soon as possible.
You mean the Hangerback Walker?
The Hangerback Walker.
Ooh, here's a Hardened Scales.
Yeah, it's turning in a situation where he's going to have to kill Edgar from the air.
Yeah, if Edgar can find an answer to that Smuggler's Copter, things get much better. But here's a big draw, 4th land. Time for Rankle. Now we have 6 power worth of flying. Chris drew a Fatal Push from the Copter loot. Edgar's going to fall to just 9. And it again feels like he's in need of a miracle draw.
Yeah, and this extra 3 points of power from a Flyers is, it's huge, right? It just doubles the clock here. It's going to put Edgar to the test so much faster.
He found Winding Constrictor. He can make this Hangerback Walker huge, but he needs to kill it, actually.
Yeah, he needs to get it off of the board. So, one of the reasons I don't like the Fatal Push a lot out of Edgar's deck is that you don't have the ability to make it kill 4-drops all the time. Mm-hmm. You actually, very little of the time, have the ability to make it kill 4-drops.
Very true.
And this is kind of a similar situation.
Well, there is that Winding Constrictor. Chris draws, I think he drew another Murderous Rider. Fatal Push on the Winding Constrictor. Yeah, you just have to let that die. Now it's time for attacks. Cast Murderous Rider, cruise up Copter. Gonna go ahead and loot. Makes the block there on Scrounger. Gonna take 8. Fall to 1 is Edgar. And Rankle gonna draw a card, and that is going to do it for Chris Barone.
Yep.
Remains undefeated here at the Star City Games Invitational. Beats Edgar Magalhaes 2-1. Craig, that was just a great display of the power of this mono black aggro deck. It looks so strong in those games 2 and 3.
Yeah, it's the versatility, right? Where you're saying I've got the disruption on the early turns.